Before you buy a wheelchair, stop for a minute. Because one of the most expensive mistakes disabled people make is buying the wrong chair for the life they're actually living. You can spend a lot of money and still end up with something that won't fit through your front door, won't turn properly in your home, won't fit in your car, or leaves you dependent on somebody else every time you want to go out. And that's exactly what we're going to help you avoid in this video.
Most people start by comparing wheelchairs, but that's actually the wrong place to begin. Before you compare chairs, you need to understand what problem you're trying to solve.
And that's especially important if you're buying for somebody else. Quite often, the person researching wheelchairs isn't the person who's going to be using one. It might be a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, or a family carer trying to work out what happens next. So before you start comparing wheelchairs, the first question you need to answer is a simple one. How much of the time is that person actually going to be travelling alone?
That question matters more than a lot of people realise. Because if you're usually going to have somebody with you, a lightweight self-propelled wheelchair may be all you need. But if you're expecting to go shopping, visit friends, get to appointments, or simply get out of the house on your own, that can point you towards a completely different type of chair. So before you look at wheel sizes, batteries, motors, or specifications, ask yourself this. Who's actually providing the power? The next mistake is one I've seen people make more than once. They buy the chair first and measure the house afterwards. And that's how you discover that your new wheelchair won't fit where you actually need to go. And it isn't just doorways either. People often measure the front door and then stop there. What they don't think about is the turning space inside the house. Can you turn into the kitchen? Can you get into the bathroom? Can you turn round in the living room without constantly shuffling backwards and forwards? Because if the chair fits through the door but won't actually move around the house properly, you've still got a very expensive problem. Getting through the door is only half the battle. Once you're inside, you've still got to turn corners, get into the kitchen, get into the bathroom, and sometimes reverse out again if there's simply not enough space. That's the sort of thing nobody tells you until after the chair arrives.
And this is where things can get expensive very quickly. A lot of people buy a wheelchair first, then discover they need a different cushion, a ramp, a vehicle adaptation, or even a completely different chair. The chair itself is only part of the cost. What usually matters more is how you're actually going to use it day after day. Because if you can't transport it easily, it doesn't really matter how good the chair is. A wheelchair that folds quickly and lifts comfortably is often far more useful than a chair with lots of extra features.
And that's probably the biggest mistake people make. They start by looking at wheelchairs instead of looking at their own lives. Before you spend any money, ask yourself where you'll use it, who will be helping you, how you'll transport it, and whether your home can actually accommodate it. Those answers usually tell you which chair you need long before the specifications do.
Which is exactly why we picked this chair for today's example. Not because it's perfect, not because it's the best wheelchair ever made, but because it's simple, lightweight, folds easily, and for many people it's an affordable place to start while they're still working out what they actually need. Sometimes the sensible first purchase is better than chasing the perfect solution.
Now, if you're sitting there thinking, that's all very well, but I can't self-propel a wheelchair, then you're not alone. A lot of people simply don't have the strength, stamina, or mobility to push themselves around all day. And that's where things start to get interesting, because the next type of chair solves one problem, but creates a few new questions of its own. This is where a powered wheelchair starts to make sense. Instead of relying on somebody else to push, the chair provides the power. For many people, that means greater independence, more freedom, and the ability to get out and about without constantly needing help. But those advantages come with a few new things you need to think about. This is where a powered wheelchair starts to make sense. Instead of relying on somebody else to push, the chair provides the power. And for many people, that extra independence can make everyday life much easier. Of course, that extra independence doesn't come for free. Powered wheelchairs bring a few new things to think about. You've got batteries to charge, extra weight to consider, and transporting the chair can sometimes become more complicated. So, before you decide a power chair is right for you, it's worth thinking about how and where you'll actually use it. Because the best chair isn't always the most powerful one. It's the one that fits your life.
A lot of people stop looking once they've found a powered wheelchair. But for some people, there's another question worth asking. How easy is that chair actually going to be to live with indoors? If you're spending a lot of time in kitchens, bathrooms, hallways, and tighter spaces, the way a chair turns can become just as important as the fact that it's powered. And that's where our third example comes in.
This is an example of what's known as a mid-drive powered wheelchair. Unlike the previous chair, the drive wheels are positioned underneath the user, and that one design difference can have a surprisingly large effect on how the chair behaves around the home.
And this is where the wheel position really starts to matter. Because a mid-drive chair turns very differently from most other powered wheelchairs. Instead of swinging a long front or rear end around corners, the chair pivots much closer to the point where you're sitting. In practical terms, that can make it easier to maneuver around kitchens, hallways, bathrooms, and other tight spaces. If your home is a bit of a squeeze, that's something well worth paying attention to.
Now, that doesn't mean everybody needs a mid-drive chair. For a lot of people, a standard powered wheelchair will do everything they need. But if you're spending most of your time indoors, and you're constantly dealing with tight spaces, narrow turns, and awkward room layouts, a mid-drive chair may be worth considering. The important thing is understanding the problem you're trying to solve before you start comparing products.
So let's put all three of these options side by side. If somebody is usually going to be pushing you, a lightweight self-propelled wheelchair can be a simple and affordable place to start. If independence is your priority, a powered wheelchair can give you the freedom to get out and about on your own. And if you need that independence, but also spend a lot of time navigating tighter spaces indoors, a mid-drive chair may be worth a closer look. None of them is automatically the right answer. It all comes back to how you actually live your life.
If there's one thing we'd like you to take away from this video, it's this. Don't start by asking which wheelchair is best. Start by asking where you'll use it, who'll be helping you, how you'll transport it, and whether your home can actually accommodate it. Once you know the answers to those questions, choosing the right chair becomes a lot easier, and you'll be far less likely to spend money on something that turns out to be wrong for your situation.
If you'd like to take a closer look at any of the three example chairs we've discussed, we've put clearly labelled links in the description below. One for the lightweight manual chair, one for the standard powered wheelchair, and one for the mid-drive chair. And before you go, we'd genuinely like to hear from you. Are you just starting to look at wheelchairs? Have you already bought one? Or are you trying to decide whether a manual chair, a power chair, or something more specialised would suit you best? Let us know in the comments. We do read them, and they help us decide what videos to make next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.